I'm going to be talking to you about reel mowers today. Doesn't matter which model you got. If you got a push reel mower, this video is for you. I've been using this thing for a couple years. It's really dirty. I'm going to go ahead and rinse it off so I can show you some of the parts. All right, things are largely clean now and mostly dry. So I'm going to get down on my hands and knees and show you some of this stuff. All right, no matter what reel mower you have, no matter how old or ugly it is, it's basically the same thing. This is kind of how it stands. The roller is where you stand. You grab your handle, pull it back. So this is the orientation for cutting the grass. These are the two common issues that I want to talk to you about. If you got an old mower that's all rusty and the reel, so this is the reel, and the reel as it spins, the spinning part brushes up against this, which is called the bed knife. So this is the stationary part of the blade. So in terms of like scissors, when you're cutting paper, you're holding that thing and you're squeezing it, the two blades cross against each other and they cut. So this blade, the reel, as it spins, it brushes up against your bed knife. So essentially that's two different blades. The reel, of course, has however many blades on the cylinder. Point being is, if you are not able to get your cylinder to turn, the temptation is to think, this thing is all rusted up and it won't work. Maybe it's a piece of junk. And that might be the case, but the problem might actually be these two bolts on either side. Now, I don't know, I've never seen a reel mower that didn't have these bolts. So if you're unfamiliar, that's what these bolts are for. Those bolts adjust this bed knife up and down. So the reel, you know, it's just sitting there, just spinning. That's stationary. It's not moving. You can't move it up and down. You move the bed knife closer. Now, if this bed knife is too close to these, then essentially there's too much friction and the reel won't turn. And the way that you adjust that is with these little guys. And these might be rusty and they might be hard to turn. Even if they're not rusty, they're still hard to turn. They're supposed to be hard to turn because you don't want them loosening or tightening on you on accident while you're using the mower. Now, the opposite side of the equation is, I'm using my reel mower and maybe it used to be cutting the grass perfectly fine in the past, but it doesn't seem to be cutting the grass much anymore. Now, the issue could be sharpening your reel blade, or your reel blades here, or your bed knife blade. And that's the part that people are like, I don't really want to go through the trouble of trying to sharpen the blade myself. I don't want to take this thing off. I mean, it's like $100 piece of equipment. I don't want to take it to a shop and pay for someone to sharpen it. Maybe I'll just junk it. Maybe I'll buy another one. Maybe I'll just, I don't know, deal with a poorly cutting lawnmower. But the issue might not actually be a sharp blades. Again, the issue might be these bolts right here. So if you have it set too loose, so maybe at some point, because notice here, when I push this, it makes a lot of squeaking noise. Now, maybe I could lubricate that in some way to decrease the noise. But if you don't like the noise, someone might have loosened these bolts up or changed the pattern of these bolts to pull the bed knife away from the reel a little bit more than they should. And that will actually limit the noise that it makes, but it's limiting the noise because the reel is not scraping against the bed knife. Take the noise out of consideration. At some point here, you might have had a reel mower that was working great, but over the years, somehow or other, these bolts have changed their orientation. Maybe through freeze-thaw cycles, if they were left out overnight, maybe just through wear and tear, just bumping, or maybe through the act of mowing your grass over and over and over, you have slowly shaved some of the metal off of either one of the blades to the point where they're not coming in contact very well anymore, or at all. So through no fault of your own, the contact between these two, the bed knife and the reel, might not be as tight as it's supposed to be. And that means we need to adjust these bolts. It's really that simple. Because these bolts are very, very tight, you need to get yourself a very big screwdriver to be able to get a lot of leverage, or you have to use like a ratcheting kind of leverage wrench style screwdriver to move these things, and you are barely going to move them. Instead of changing my butt position, I'm going to change the mower. So if you look in here, you've got this bolt right here goes through and it presses down on the top of the bed knife. And you see the bed knife here? It's got this little swivel. Like, nobody really calls it a swivel, but it's basically on a swiveling kind of center point. And then this side over here, this bolt, also goes through it and pushes down on it too. So you got to think to yourself, if I tighten this, it's going to push this side down. It has to swivel and push up into that bolt right there. So if I tighten this, it's going to bring the bed knife up closer to the reel here. And then this one, if I loosen this, then that means the existing pressure on this is also going to push it up, but maybe not quite as much. Conversely, if the reel is not turning at all, that might be because there's too much tension, too much pressure between the reel and the bed knife. And that means you need to tighten this screw so we're pushing that part of like the cutting side of the bed knife down. And if we loosen this, then that allows it to come up. Now you don't have to do it very much, otherwise suddenly you're not going to have contact at all. We're talking micro turns here. Like, we're not even talking a quarter of a turn or an eighth of a turn. Sometimes we're talking about a 1/16 of a rotation, like barely anything. And whatever you're going to do to this side, you'll probably have to do to this side. And you're going to have to end up adjusting ever so slightly all four of these things and testing the way that the reel is turning and scraping the bed knife to actually achieve the rotation and the cut that you want. Now, the truth be told here, I've owned this reel mower for 2 years. I've never once sharpened the blades. But I want to show you the difference between a bed knife that is not flush, it's not tight, up against the cylinder, and then I guess I'll show you what it looks like when it's too tight, because it just won't turn. I just can't turn it. But then I'll adjust it to the correct tension, the correct touchingness. We want them to touch just right. Right now, this is actually just right. It's a little squeaky, but it's just right. I'm going to go ahead and cut 1 or 2 strips with this. This is currently adjusted properly. And then I'm going to adjust it to the point where it's not cutting well to show you what the difference is. Right now I'm going to loosen it barely so that it doesn't cut well. And this is what happens, this is just what happens over time when you don't constantly monitor the tension between your reel and the bed knife. That's it. I'm going to go the opposite direction, barely, here to do the same thing. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Tighten, barely. Loosen, barely. Very little sound, so it's probably coming in contact slightly, not by much. Now I'll do 2 more strips with the contact not very tight, and then we'll go and compare the cut quality. Again, remembering that this cut quality is, there's no, like, this is an unsharpened blade. So this is literally just the tension. All right. This first one is with the bed knife in contact just fine. I guess this is really hard to put on camera, but we've got a few blades that didn't really cut, but there's not very much sticking up. The only thing that's really kind of sticking up is where the wheel marks were. The wheel mark between the two strips, so as the wheel goes over, it pushes the grass down. So when the roller comes back the other direction, the grass isn't sticking up to cut it. So here, it's not exactly perfect. And that's why you end up seeing people with reel mowers going in both directions, multiple directions. Rotary mowers have a suction action by the blade spinning around, so it'll kind of suck those grass things back up. Reel mowers, you don't get that with push reel mower. So we come next to the one where there was less friction between the reel and the bed knife. I do see a notable difference. I see it. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but over here, on average, these blades are just simply taller, and that's because not all of them are cutting. I sure do wish I could get this on camera better, but hey, I'm not a professional videographer. I just make random videos on YouTube. Little section, a lot of this stuff right here. This whole area right here just seems too tall. I suppose this is just a quick tip video, possibly a little too long-winded like many of my videos are, but if you don't really want to go through the trouble of sharpening your reel or trashing it and buying a new one, just get yourself a big screwdriver and fiddle around with those screws. You might find that your mower still works just fine, like good enough for you, if you can get that contact correct. It's not rocket science. Literally, fiddle with it. It's like a little toddler trying to get the square into the circle hole on their little toddler toys. Eventually, they figure out that the square goes into the square hole. Fiddle with it, and you'll figure it out. If your reel's not turning, if you get those nuts to turn, you'll be able to get the reel to turn. If your reel isn't cutting the grass at all, it's probably way too loose. Tighten it up, and it'll start cutting. Might not be a perfect cut, but it will cut. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen this mower for the first time ever. I'm gonna be using a hand sharpening tool, something that you can just buy on Amazon. I'm gonna give it a try and see what I think. When that video is out, I'm definitely gonna make a video about it. It's gonna be linked right up here. Take a look at that next if you wanna take the next step. And of course, I've never taken that step before, so you follow along with me.